המשך חיים בייס, דיבר המסחיל, יום השכונה, הללו סביה, כל גויים, עומד תוף כ"ה. So we saw the Pashtus Inyanim, we saw the union of the Yichud and the Neshama im Aguf, the Nefesh im Aguf, and we saw that the union of these Shachtas was such that they became Shachtas Gemura, and the Pshat was that not that the Guf was a Dover Chai, and or not that it was something that the Neshama enters it, and Bamele, it remains a Dover Meis, and the Neshama just pushes it and makes it live. But we saw that the Indian was that the Guf Ein Chanami. Mitzad Etzem Yonei, the Guf is a Dover Girlmi, and it's a fila. The Indian from Movis Mitzad Atzmei, Mitzad the Etzem Indian of Choyma Agashmi is in the Guf. However, we saw that through the union of the Slabshas, then the Guf became a Dover Chai. That was the Nakuda. Not that the Nefesh just pushes it around, and that the Nefesh is in it, Mitzad the Tnuas Nefesh, the Guf gains a Tnua from the Nefesh, but we saw that the Guf itself becomes a Dover Chai. In other words, that every, like we call it nowadays, every ta, every cell, every portion of the Guf actually becomes alive from the contact with the Nefesh. What that means, that Henochanami, the Guf Mitzad Atzmei, is not like that. The Guf Mitzad Atzmei is the union of Hoive V'Nifsad, and there was the union from Moritz Mitzad Atzmei. However, the entrance of the Guf into it causes that each aspect of that Guf becomes a Dover Chai. Henochanami, B'Istalchus HaGuf, B'Istalchus HaNefesh, V'Hanishoma, so then Henochanami, the Guf returns to that state. But Koloi, that the Neshama is there, then the Guf Mamish lives and becomes itself a Dover Atzmoi Chai. And now that the Dugma for that Lamaila is much more, because we're going to see, and we already mentioned it briefly at the end of the last year, but Dugma Mizel Lamaila on the last two lines of Tov Kof Hei, שהכלים הן בבחינת קיום עצמי מצד הסלבשוס האוהר בהם, שהוא בבחינת איסחטס ממש. In other words, the slabshus of the oil inside the kelim causes that the kelim become mamish like the oil. And just like the oil has what we call a kiyum atzmi, so then the kelim mitzad the yeshachtas with the oil, so then the kelim also gain the sinion of kiyum atzmi. Now that's a very key expression, even though it occurs here, but there's a lot of biurim, a lot of inyonim b'zeh b'chsidus. What does it mean, kiyum atzmi? Just like the Alter Rebbe brings in Igeres HaKodesh, benegir to the Eibishter, the Etzem HaMatzil himself, Atzm Sein Seif, that he is Metziusei me Atzmusei. Ve'ener olu mishum siba olav siba hakodma lo yisborach. That means that the Eibishter's Metzius is a Metzius Atzmiyas. In other words, the Metzius Mitzad Atzmi, he never had anything which caused him or brought him about, or in any way has affected his Metzius. Among it, Mitzad that, it's shy to say that he has what we call Kiyum Atzmi. In other words, now Metzius and Kiyum are really two inyonim. And I don't want to, I'm not necessarily being, Makashi the two inyonim together. Metzius is one inyan and Kiyum is another inyan. But like we see when I get to any entity, its Metzius is the fact that it's there. Kiyum is its lastingness, or its ability to continue being the way it is. That's called Kiyum. So the fact that the Eibishter is Metziusei me'atzmusei, then it also means that kiyumai, well, it doesn't necessarily mean, but by the Eibusher it does, that his kiyum is also atzmi. In other words, he will always be exactly the way he is, mitzad atzmoi, not that he has any goyrim or he's not tolu in any ilava siba. The difference between the oyer and the chiddush here is the kelim, that they do have a beginning. In other words, that metziusam is einum me'atzmusam. They come mitzad the moya. However, the yichud of the oyer with the moya is that they take on some of the essential aspects of the moya, and therefore, just like the kiyumei me'atzmusay, apart from the Metziusay Mi'atzmosay, we're now looking at the Kiyum, they at least gain that from their Yichud with the Moya. Metziusay Mi'atzmosay, they'll never be able to gain because they come from the Moya. They began. They had what's called a Kodmei Aheder. There was a state where there was nothing of their Metzius, and then they came about through the Hamshocha from the Moya. However, once they do come about, then they gain the other aspect of the Atzmus, which is Kiyumim Atzmusi. That they do gain, which means that they now, they as it were exist mitzad their own being. They continue to exist mitzad their own being. You can't say that their very existence is mitzad their own being, but they gain this unbelievable maila that their kiyum is mitzad atzmai. In other words, that they're no longer tolui in any other power. They, as it were, they live or they continue to exist and to function mitzad their own self. And that's called kiyum atzmi. And that they gain from the yichud with the moya. It's not shaykh to say anything like that. Only mitzad the yichud with the moya. So normally speaking, we say that the oyer is kiyumam miatzmusam. So here the Rebbe says that the yichud at the kelim with the oiros is so amiti and so immense that even the kelim, what they're another getter altogether, they're not ha'ora atzmi is from the moya, and therefore they don't have that yichud with the moya that the oiros have. However, al yedei the yichud of the kelim with the oil, then the kelim also become kiyumam miatzmusam. And that's what he says, that they are in a state of kiyum atzmi mitzad islabshus oerbohem. Because the ikar goyim which gives them this inyan is the oil. Shuhu b'chinas isaktus mamish. Now here we're talking, when we say isaktus, we mean isaktus between the oils and the kelim. Ubi emes yichud ha'oiros im ha'kelim hu yoser miyuchud v'yischabes hanishom im haguf. Said the Rebbe, of course we've got to bear in mind that even though we've gone from the yichud of the neshama to the guf, with the guf, into the yichud of the kelim with the oiros, then we've got to understand that it's a tremendous merchach ha'erev between the two. Because the yichud of the oiros with the kelim is much more and incomparably more than the yichud of the Yischabes and the Neshama im haguf. So now, why? Because the Yischabes of the Neshama im haguf is so kosof in shnei dvorim, nifrodim ze mizeh, shoinim ze mizeh, and until k'movu bekama mekemis, so there's even hafochim ze mizeh. That the guf and the Neshama are mamish hafuchim. Ibamela, it's a great chiddush to say that there's a yichud otzm between them till the kli, which is the guf, mamish lives on, becomes a dover chai from the ischabshus and the neshama. However, the kelim lamaila are not in that way at all. The kelim are not separate in yonim from the oyer. They're for sure not dvarim hafuchim mi'haoyer. However, how can you say that? The keli is a dover shoine be'etzim inyone from the oil. So here we see the Rebbe goes like a series of stages here, which is a very dachistic inyan, and due to the difficulties, which for some strange reason Hashem wanted I should have, I haven't been able to mamish be be misamik in the in and kikola tzurich as amrogil prior to these classes. But however, suffice it to say that there come shittas in the great Mekubalim as to what are the status, literally, of the Kelim, how they are in Atzilas. Now we're talking about in Atzilas, where that's where the Kelim actually appear, because the Choladay is how the Kelim are Lamaila me Atzilas, and they have different stages of his butlers inside the earth, which we'll mention something al derech odma. So there was the Rebbe. We have about 3 or 4 days in Kabbalah beneged to the status of the Kelim, and we're going now milmaila lamata, as it were, from the highest view of that yichud and that inter-status between the Eretz and the Kelim, down to views which make the Kelim and the Eretz more separate in its Mahusa. So the Rebbe said that this merchak ha'era between the Mashal and the Neshama with the Guf and the Eretz and the Kelim is greater the higher you understand the status of the Kelim legabi the Guf. Sheharei Ladas HaMareches. Now when he says Mareches, there's a famous sefer in Kabbalah, was Le'ezat Mitzad Chalisha Sakeli. I've forgotten the name of the author. But anyway, he wrote a famous sefer called Mareches Elakus. I have the sefer though. I just forgotten who's the Mechaber. The Mareches Elakus, and it's a sefer or a very early Makubal, that he deals Shmoi Keinhu with the whole Mareches of the Gilui of the Eretz for Kelim, and the whole the Elamas and the Yachas of all the different Inyanim from Lamailama Atzilas and through Atzilas all the way down into the Elamas Biyah and their Eretz and Kelim v'chule. A great work in the Inyan of Kabbalah, which he calls Mareches Ha'elakus, as he calls it. So according to the Mareches, Viho Avedus HaKodesh. Now the Avedus HaKodesh is a more familiar work. That was written by a very early Makubal, very, very early. If I'm not mistaken, he was even in the latter period of the Rishonim, and he was called the Maran Ibn Gabbai, or the Maram, Rabbeinu Meir Ibn Gabbai, Maram Ibn Gabbai. That was his name, and he wrote this great work called the Avedus HaKodesh, which is a work in Chakira Elakis v'Kabbalah. It's very readable, very, very tremendously Masuda, and he's the famous one that Chassidus quotes on many occasions, where he says that the Gvul Hanimta Memenu Tchila, that's the Esa Kelim, the Esa Kelim with the Esa Spheres Tatzila, the very famous Ramah, V'imata Oime She'en Lo Koyach B'Gvul Ata Machaser Shlei Musay, that famous quote, but that's from the Avedus HaKodesh. So interestingly enough, we see that even though he calls the Kelim the Koyach HaGvul Hanimta Memenu Tchila, we're going to see here that really that has to be taken also somewhat in a modified way, because he holds a very special shitta beneged to the Kelim, which puts him in the same bracket, more or less. Maybe not, but tachlis the exactitude, maybe there's slight differences, but Claudius, they can be linked together, that they hold that the Esesphiras hein etzem elokus mamish. Now it's well known that everybody holds that Elam Achilas is Elam Elokus, and it's not Cholila b'chinas Nivra, Klal. However, we're going to see later on that oddly enough, the Alter Rebbe, of all people, I say the Alter Rebbe, our Rebbe, he holds that the Kelim and Atzilas, even though they're mamish, he also would agree that they're mamish Elokus, but he holds that they're already a certain koyach in Elokus, which is already beginning to express itself the way it does in Olam HaBriah. In other words, that he holds that the Kelim are already a koyach like Bria inside Atzilas. The Alter Rebbe holds a very special shitta beneged to the Kelim, and therefore you can't really say, according to him, or even according to a slightly higher day, which is the Pardes, that the Esses Firas are mamish etzem elokus mamish. Because that means, when we say Sphiras, we mean Oiras and Kelim. That's the Choladeas. There's Oiras and Kelim. That's what a Sphira is. If you say that hein etzem elokus mamish, What you mean by that is that they are just like the oil is a gilui of the moya. Also, the kelim are a gilui mamish of the moya, even though they represent another koyach, as the Vedas HaKodesh himself says, but they represented how it is mitzad the moya, how it is almost, as you might say, in the moya himself. And we're going to see the Rebbe says that mamish later, that they hold that Atzilus is just like a potential gilui. But when I call it potential, because it's really just a gilui of how these inyonim are in the etem. How these inyonim are in the etem elakus, how he's lamayla miya Atzilus lagamre, it just somehow or another expresses itself in Atzilus. And therefore nothing really alters between the way the oilers and the kelim are lamayla miya Atzilus and Atzilus. And that's what he means, that the etzem elakus mamish, v'ainu shegama kelim ein b'pchinas atzilus. Now the reason he says that is because, like we said, the Alter Rebbe and even the Pardes, they hold that the kelim are not atzilus, no, they're what we call bria sheva atzilus. In other words, they're another inyan, another nuance that finds themselves inside atzilus. But according to these two parties, the kelim are mamish, the madrega of atzilus. Dahainu, Ne'atzalim miya elakus, they're just a gilui of the helem. Yeah, they're gilui, the way things are in elakus, that's the way they are in Atzilus. V'im kein, hariheim mahus achas mamish ima oiras, v'ein ze klal k'moi shnei dvorima mishyachadim. That you can't say that there are kelim and that there are oiras and they get together. No, the two of them, since we're talking here, it's almost like you might say that you're sitting in Lamaila and you're just looking down somewhat. It's just like something manages somehow or another to come down through the camera rays, as you might say, from the way it is, and you just see it on a level which makes it more observable. But we're really talking about how it is in the etzem, and that elakus, how it is in Atzilus, is just an expression of the etem, something similar to, like we say, that pnimis abba, he pnimius atik mamish. We say that that's just how atik comes over into the Ne'atzalim. The same way here, there's no real alteration. It's just a slight yerida for the sake of the mekablim. Just like we say that there is a delicate nafkamina between atik k'moishuhu and atik k'moishuhu be pnimius abba. So there was the Rebbe V'yesh Loima. So we've got to try and understand him Kain. What is the inyan of the Kalim Lufi this shitta? If there's not two inyanim, there's not oiras for Kalim and one is mamish mislavish in the other, then how do you talk about oiras for Kalim? Maybe the oir I'm prepared to understand, as you might say. What are the Kalim? How do they express themselves according to that shitta? V'yesh loima, said the Rebbe, tell me a suggestion, the lashita zu, inyan ha-kelim hu rak is galus ha'er. The inyan of the kli is only the gilui of the er. Now, why he says that, we'll soon see in a second. V'harei ha-gilui ena mahus acha mina etem. Everybody understands that our gilui from our etem is not a dover nivdil from the etem. No, on the contrary, the dover hamish gala min etem is mamish betachas hayichud and miyain haetem mami. And the fact that he says that it's the kelim, they're only the gilui min haetem, then that means that the etzem and its gilui are moving, that they are one inyan mamish, and it's not that there's another inyan here in the middle into which the gilui is mishyachid or mislavi. That according to this understanding, the oira and the oiras and the kelim are mamish one inyan. Ela, that the oira is mitzad etzem tivom, inyan is aliyah v'dveikes, and the kelim is a koyach in the oil, which causes them to be yoredu misgala. In other words, that the Eibster puts into the oil a koyach which makes it go down and be misgala. Now I'm meduic in what I'm saying, because that's what's going to be said a bit later. That the union of the oil is afilu haraya in Atzilus, it's mavur in Baruch Mekemis and says that all the spheres before Malchus, all of them are in a state of aliyah v'iskalus in the moya. And then when we talk about Esser spheres, we don't really know what we're talking about because they're all in a oifen from aliyah v'dveikus in the moya. That what we say that there's a yachas from one sphere to the other. That let's say spheres chokhmah is meya into spheres abina, and spheres abina is meya into chesed or k'yetzer b'zeh. Yeah, or that's only that there's a certain koyach hagilui mi etzem sphere shu etzem elakus into another sphere. And that koyach hagilui va'yerida, or that's called what we might say malchus shebesphira ha'u. That's called the union for malchus shebesphira ha'u, and that's called the keli shebesphira ha'u, according to the Shitta. But it's only a power that the oya gains to reveal itself and not be in a state of aliyah v'istalkis. That's all. Not that there's any entity called keli, but the Eibishter literally puts inside the oya an ability to allow itself to be mishgala. And that
the oar has two opposite.
Yeah, the oar has two opposite tnuas. One tnua, which is mitzad the oya, mitzad its own gishmak, as you might say, mitzad its own inyan, is aliyah, and then there's another inyan in oya which makes it be mishgala. Or that inyan which causes it to be mishgala, that's called keli. Or not there's anything really called a keli. Can you understand? It's a pili place. That's what the Indian of the Mareches. And the Indian is that the Avodas HaKodesh also holds to say, even though certain Lashonos that he has to say, tend to be a little bit tempting to maybe understand it differently, but that's what the Rebbe says here.
Is Bina the Kli for Chochmah and
No, that's not right. Bina is another oil. Bina is another Indian, another oil. The Avish was Matzil oil called Bina. There's an ability of Chokhmah in its lower level to reveal itself in a way that it'll give a certain shefa of its oil into Bina. Can you understand? But that Yerida of the oil to another oil, to give rise and to help another oil to be Mishkala, that's called Keli. But there's no such thing as a Keli. There's no such thing as a limited entity in which the oil is mislavish. Because the Mareches holds that you can't say that. You can't say that when you talk only in Elikus, you can't talk about two different inyonim. He said the Eibush doesn't have two inyonim. He doesn't have one in and another in. He plays within himself that he calls this part of himself to enter another part of himself. He tells us that that's all out of the question. So he says all the Kalim, if you talk about Kalim, in Atzilus, you're only talking about abilities that are planted inside the earth to either go down or to go up.
So if I call Achdus Achat, how can you differentiate between the Sfirot? There is a Sfirot, no Sfirot.
Yeah, you don't really. You can't really differentiate between them. You can only differentiate in the sense that the Eibishter revealed, because I understand what you're telling. Your time is written in Rava Mekemis and says that the Ikein of a Sfirot is its Keli. And the whole, that's what's written in many places, that the whole Inyan of Chesed is in the Keli, over the Earth. But that's the subshitas. And don't come to us to say. Understand here? And that's going to evolve in another big discussion, which I don't want to get into right now. You've got a good point. Normally speaking, we say there's another entity called the Kli. The Ur is Poshet, and the Kli, that's the Chesed, that's the Chokmah. They state in the Kuti Torah, in many places. Oh, that's going to be the shit of the Alter Rebbe. And that's what we're going to see right at the end of this little chapter here. That's the Alter Rebbe. But these people, they don't know that. They don't know that you can talk that way. In Elikus, Atzilus, and that's what the Rebbe said, Hein Atzilus. Atzilus means he himself, that's him. Atzilus is the Eibishter making, as it were, certain nuances and preparations in himself to give rise eventually to these others, or the Elamans. So they say, where you're talking inside him, you haven't got two separate inyonim. It's all one thing by him. In the Eibishter, there's no two inyonim. There's who? Can you follow the idea? The Eibishter gives forth a certain gilui, or that's only like a inyan for an oil. Oil they can go for, because oil is mamish me'en amoya. Oil they go for. Anything more than that you can't really say. In oil gufa, the Eibishter caused that oil can somehow or another talk about itself in a way. That talking about itself, that's called Kli. That's what it reveals itself. That's called a Kli. The way it was revealed l'chatchila, it was meant to be chesed. You understand? Or Elohim came will be mechalik in another even. I don't want to sort of get into too much into the details of it right now. That's according to them. So there was the Rebbe. Harei agilu ena mahus achav min ha'etzer. In Nimtza, that the Kli is only these galas. It's the ability that the oil has to reveal itself and show itself kilo to another oil. That in him, that is galas. Yesh leima b'bei seifanim. We could say that in two ways. Ha'alev. Now we're talking only about these galas. Shehu al der bechinas hamalchis. Shehu inin agiloi. Ukenoida, the spheres shalamayla mibchinas hamalchis, heim b'chinas devekis bimkoirom. Va'agiloi u b'chinas hamalchis. Ukemoish yizboel kamon. That's going to be explained later in Chelik Beis, in Parsha Vayigas. There's a maim over there where the Rebbe talks about that inyan. V'al derech zeh hu inyan hakelim l'shitas hamareches. The Rebbe said that we are mavaya later on in the Hemshech that all the spheres in Atzilus are really not in a state of Yerida V'Gilui. And they really have no entity per se. Their whole union is mitzad Ika in Yonim is Oyer, and the union of Oyer is Aliyah V'Dveikis Bimkoy. In other words, we have to go back to the whole original idea of Oyer. And the whole original idea of Oyer is that it doesn't want to be Miskali. On the contrary, it wants to be Oyleve. And on the contrary, we say that Teva Oyer, the Etchim Tchuna of Oyer is to be Oyleve Dovok Bim Koyer. Amamecha, says the Rebbe, all the spheres in Atzilus, L'chol HaDeyes, are really in that state of Aliyah Dveikis, because L'chol HaDeyes, Ika HaSpheres, is Oyer in Atzilus. The Inyan from Keli Eksha, who hasn't yet become mamish a functioning material, because even the Alter Rebbe, that he says that it's mamish a Inyan from Gvul, he holds it's still only koyach Gvul. It's not mamish the Inyan from Gvul mamish, even though he writes mamish, but in a way he doesn't really. He means it's the koyach Gvul mamish. Amamela. L'chol HaDeyes the Ika is the Inyan of Oyer. All the spheres in Atzilus are in a state of Aliyah V'Stalchus V'Dveikis L'mayla. What causes, like we just said, that one Oyer goes down and somehow or another gives a shefa or forms a connection with another Oyer, or that's the Koach of the Keli. And that Keli is called the Malchus Shebekol Sphira. In other words, it's just like we see that Malchus by a mensch is the ability to give over things to another being, Dibur, and his kashrus of the Etzem Odom Atzmei to a Shomaya. So Kaviochol Lamayla, there's a inyan called Malchus, what Inyone is Gilui Klapei Zulas. What sort of Zulas is there in Atzilus? Another Gera of the Oyer, another inyan in the Oyer. Amamela, that ability to express from one to the other, well, that's called Malchus. And that's the inyan of Gilui. In other words, that the Oyer is so in a state of Aliyah V'Stalchus that they don't care about Gilui. They don't even talk the whole idea of Gilui. And therefore that Koyach HaMalchus, which is in them, the Rebbe says in that Maimah, is not really from them. It's not really from them. It's from the Koyach HaAtzmi of the Eibishter. He has this ability to make, as we said, the Koyach HaGvul, as it were. But here it's not Koyach HaGvul. It's the ability to make something be in a state of Gilui. Because I say, since the Ika Inyan prior to Malchus Atzilus is Oires, nothing wants to be Begilui. Nothing's prepared really to be Begilui. In order to make Gilui, there has to be a power called Koyach HaGilui. And that's called Malchus. That's called Malchus. And Mamela says, the Rebbe over there in that Maimah, he said, that's the Inyan of the Malchus Shebechol Sphira. Begin begins the Vegas Bimkorim, but Agilui begins some Malchus.
It's also above Atzilus?
Huh?
That's that also happens above Atzilus?
Above Atzilus we've got no problems, but Ein Achanami b'minda Mesuyemet, but in Tuyu it didn't happen.
The Oris came down.
Yeah, it didn't happen in Tuyu. but something caused the Oros to come down from Akudim into Tohu, and that was this Kli Echad. You follow? There was an Akudim, and that Kli Echad in Akudim was this Indian boy from Kloli. And therefore, according to some Biurim, the Alter Rebbe says in the Siddur that that's why the Shvira is really Miyuchas to Akudim. But on the other hand, in another mind, he writes Chas V'Sholem to say that the Shvira was in Akudim. It's how can you have a cake and eat it too? What he means is that the way it is in Akudim, it's just the Koyach HaGilui. What happened in Tohu is that it actually went down. But it went down the way it is in Akudim. And in Akudim, it's all sort of linked together. It's all sort of one in you. The way it came down into Olam HaTohu was that everything came down the way it is with all its Toikif and all its inya. So therefore, everything couldn't get together. Yeah. So therefore, really, it happened mitzad Akudim, but it didn't happen in Akudim. Al Chaponim, that Kli Echad, that's the ability to be Megala, but it's only a Kli Echad. It's only Megala. These things how they are in their etzim state. In their etzim state, they're not able to get together. You know? Yeah, so Ein Lachanami, you got all the way through. You got this union of a power to reveal something. So that's called the union of the Malchus Shebechol Sfira. However, he says, we have to say, Kamosh is Boel Eil. Val Derech Zeh Hu Inen HaKeilim L'Shittas HaMareches. Yeah, we have to say that's what he calls in Atzilus the Keilim. Malchus Shebechol Sfira, which in Yonah is to reveal. Rashi said the Bechinas Malchus Hari Hu Bechinas Nivdelis Mitam Zeh. The Lafi Zeh kommt is that the union of Malchus is a Bechina Nivdelis L'Tam Zeh, because all the spheres and all the spheres included in the spheres mitzad these colors, all of them are in a state of aliyah v'dveikis klapi maila. All of a sudden you say, no, we're going down, we're going to be mashpia to another sphere, then that must be a koyach which somehow or another is mudal from all of them, because if it was just like them, then it's also going to go up. Yet over this koyach and malchus, with the koyach hagilish boy, we have to say it's a inyan nivdal, and that's this inyan of what we talk about Keli, but he's not going to like that. The Rebbe benegir to the Mareches. The fact that we say L'Tam Zeh, we mean B'klal that biur of a Sokosof. You have to say it's a little bit nivdal. But Tzarek Loima sheyesh b'zeh gam kain. Hefresh bein hamalchus shu sfira b'fnei atzmei, or bein bechinas hamalchus shu b'chol sfira. Now the Rebbe said he can run up another inyan, because later on sfiras hamalchus, at the end of all the sfiras, it's malchus, and it becomes malchus shu b'malchus. Yeah, and it becomes the lamed kelim of malchus. And they, what do? They're mahava bria yesh mi ayin. So that's moving. That's another inyan in the koyach hamalchus. So we have to be mechalik between this koyach hamalchus in the spirit, which is just to be megala them one to the other, and the ultimate malchus, which is in Yonei Hula mamish lahavish yesh miyayin. Even though each of the malchus shebespheres, he later becomes the sphere shebemalchus. For example, malchus shebechesed later becomes chesed shebemalchus bespheres hamalchus. What happens then is that there comes in another, the Rebbe writes it over there, that then there comes in another koyach atzmi from the koyach atzmi himself, where he somehow or another becomes involved in that whole inyan among them. He causes it to be another inyan over there. He causes it to jump out and all of a sudden be oilam as biyah. So that was the Rebbe. You got to be careful. If you're saying that the inyan of the mareches he's this koyach hamalchus shebechol sfira, you're going to have to be mechalik between the way it is in those spheres and the way it is mamish in the sphere itself. However, he said l'shittas hamareches tzorich loima, that the whole inyan of the inyan from malchus shebechol sfira, and particularly malchus how it is later on, he said tzorich loima shezeu al derech kemoi b'chinas hamalchus b'yoyse klula adayim b'chinas zoh. Maybe we could say that this malchus shebechol sfira, or that's the way Sfiras HaMalchus, before it ever becomes a Sfira, is what we call Kolo B'Zoh. In my middle, what is it a taich? The Ikinian from Zoh is Midas. And Midas, anyway, their Indian is Gilui Masuyam. Nonetheless, we say that they have, in order to make them be nimshach further into Neitzav Avodah and eventually become talkers to Biyah, not just to talk within themselves, but to become talkers mamish into Biyah, then inside Zohar there's this union of Malchus Herz Kolum. But it's, what do you see? You see Zohar, you don't really see Malchus. There's a kilo, a koil, which is waiting eventually to take everything down further. But in the etzem koch, the midas, just like when a mensch is in the, what you might call the tweak of his gallows of a midah, he's not started to talk yet. Yeah, and to express it. That's all going to come at a further development. So then we say that the malchus is kolul inside the midas, and that's called Sfiras HaMalchus, actually who kolul b'zoh, meaning that when time the ikar is something, and it didn't really begin the whole inyan of the Gilui yet, but to a certain extent it is the Gilui Shabbat Ha'ilu. Avamela said the Rabbi, that's what we have to say, is the inyan of the Malchus Shabbat Sfira. It's only a power just purely to suggest and to give forth a certain Gilui, but it's still within the Ikar, which is the midah. And therefore we have to say at the beginning, when a mensch begins to be megala a midah, then he's talking be'ikar the midah. Later when he gets into practicalities of how to be megala that midah through the inif and dibur, he brings in all sorts of nuances and all sorts of inyonim, which are, metzamtzim and machavan the midah one way or another, or all sorts of other entities which he may use to get across the midah. Of eisha midah bo le'etzem agilui shela betchilas inyan agilui betchilas inyan adibur, then it's purely a koyach of gilui of the midah, not of anything else. That's inyan from Malchus Herz Kolul b'zohar. So, but the Shittas HaMareches, that's what we have to say is the whole power of Gilui only in Yonim. Afila, the Inyan for Sfiras HaMalchus Mamish, it's all like we understand normally and how we're Medaber, but even clearly the Inyan of Malchus Herz Kolul b'zohar. In other words, that even in the Oifen of Malchus Ta'atzilas, the meaning for Malchus Mamish, Kipshule El Sfira, we have to say that it's a Inyan higher and much more dark in the inyan of Shefa than what we normally discuss. And therefore he compares it now. Why Mashakos of Haparlis bin in Yesod He'ofo. Now this is another famous inyan which is a delicate inyan brought down in Siddur, but it's well known that the Pardes writes in the Sefer Pardes Rimonim, the Ramak. The Pardes means the Ramak. He writes in a place that the Yesod HaOfor is really kolul in the other Yesodes, be'ikar in the Yesod HaMayim. In other words, what happens with Ofor is that it's really just a slight retreat of the other Yesodes from their presence, and b'derech mamela you have the inif and Ofor. In other words, even the way they are, they have offer in them, but if they retreat slightly, then you get offer kipshute. And he brings a dogma, the Pardes. If you take pure water, even pure water, I don't know about this water they put through all the sieves and all the other things that comes out of these little taps. I think so. In other words, that if you hold it up, klapi the oil, you can notice that this little weeny sort of particles in the water. So the Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe brings it, and it's put down in certain, I think in the Mittel Rebbe, in the Shara Yichud, and others talk about it. It's put down in Jerusalem, but in the Maftech it's a little bit hard to find it. But it is brought down. And they say that when you look at the water, are those little particles, those little shticklach that you see in the water, they're really the Yesod HaOfor, which is kolul inside the Yesod HaMayim. And they claim that if you boil away the water, then you'll never have just an empty kli. It'll just all vaporize and nothing will be left. When you boil away water, there's always a little trace of some sort of a something which is left at the bottom. How do you call it? Afurias. Oh, that was what I was looking for. That's what he calls it, the Ramak. Afurias. A certain how do you call it, dusty entity at the bottom. And you notice, I mean, particularly the water over here, if you boil water, you get a whole sediment at the bottom of you. It's like hard to get rid of it. Even if you try to be hygienic, it still forms on the bottom of the kli a certain sediment. So the part is tainus, that is really Yesod HaOfer Amiti. That's really kolul in the Mayir. That's the union of the first gilui of Yesod HaOfer, meaning that really the Yesod HaOfer is in a higher state, cold in the water, so all you see is water, and all you say is water. You don't say, oh, that's water and offer. You say it's water, but in there is the union of the offer, and if to a certain extent a nuance which will occur, I know that the other aspects of the water will withdraw. It could be the sun will dry them off, right? Or you boil it off, then you have the union of the offer. So the Rebbe said that's the union, according to the Mareches, that's the union of Malches, that's the union of Koach HaGilui, that it's so miyuchad that all you see is the Etzamin, like we said, when you get to the Midas. There's a certain trace. Yeah, and therefore, if the midas retreat somewhat, and they're oil klape maila abisal, and the Avis withdraws them slightly, then you'll have this union of gilui which will come out but it's stuck. It's not betachlis. So we have to say, according to the Marechet, how do you get this whole union from Yesh Mi'ayin, and you get this whole tremendous fanem, we have to say that Ein Chanami, there's a special nesinas koyach noisaf mimokim gavoya from the Atzmus himself. I say Muslim so. But that's Oiskahal. I mean, I think it's right to say that, because I say state beneged to certain inyonim. Quite a piece of work. So now that we said, well, even a basis even more. Look at that. He said, well, even a basis is still talking in the Mareches now, that we're saying that what is the Kli? Is Indianized Galus, or this is Galus, which we call Kli, Hainu Haglomas Ha'oyer, Li Eisa Oyer Bebchinish Machias. Haglomas Ha'oyer. Now that's a new one. Well, the word Hagloma means from the word Gelim, it suddenly becomes like a simple Choyma, Choyma Gelim means that he called the basic thing from which something's made up. So the Rebbe said that there's a Inyan that the oil itself becomes niglam. In other words, similar to another expression which we use in Sin, but not the same, because if it were, he would have used that expression. Similar to what we find in other places, the Indian fun is avus with the iron. Is avus oil. Have you ever seen that one? It's like a thickening of the oil. So here the Rebbe says hagloma. So we have to say that hagloma is a little bit less than isavus. But what does it mean? That the oil becomes metzius. Now what does he mean by that? Oil, by definition, oil being it is a gilur the moya, me'ain a moya, b'shachtas gemura she'ef shelataya goydle shachtas with the moya, and therefore oil is not a matziyah, because oil's whole inyan is a liya b'toicha ha-moya, and therefore we bring down even in Madregas of Gilead, Ein Zuloscho, that's the Indian for oil. Efes built is the Gilead of oil. Nothing else apart from the Eibishter. Remember, the whole Indian for oil is not a Indian for Matthias. It says there's no such thing as Matthias. The Amitis Gilead says Ein oil Milvade. That's what oil says. So how can oil be a Matthias that it's meir to something else, and it makes something else lichtig, means that you leave that thing the way it is and you light it up, which means that there's a inyan in oil. What oil itself becomes shayach to the idea of Matthias. In other words, it's not just the shlila of Matthias, but that's the emsalitikite, but it becomes oil which reckons and is meir to another Matthias. So we said that's called the oil becomes a machin of a Matthias. That's like the Zohar Kodesh says. The Zohar Kodesh says that the embassy in von oires is lav inun nehoirin. That really oires are not oires. That's what the Zohar Kodesh says. The oires, the way they are, mamish krulim in Atzilus and in the Etzem Ma'atzil, lav inun nehoirin. They're not lights, because light means you're lighting up something. You're lighting up something else. And for them to become Nehoirin, that means that they come a certain Metzias. The oil itself becomes a Geder Shomtzir. So he said that's according to the Marechas, another way of explaining that instead of being oil of a dovuk in its own inyan, whatever it may be, it goes down and it's ready to shine to another thing. And that's called Hagloma, which means like an alteration inside the thing itself, where the oil itself changes its state. Not that it's sort of caused to come into Gilui by another kohen, but it itself changes into a Metzias. Gay for say, was it the Hevdel Ben Zele? There you have to wait till the next year for that one. We have to be Mizboin and Ma'u Anaf Kemina Ben Shnei Pirushim Eile. And I wanted to be Mizboin, but I just for some reason I sort of snapped a little bit. I don't know what happened to me. I didn't feel well. I didn't have the chance to be Mizboin and Bo'im Kadora. What would be the Nafkemina Ben Shnei Advarim Eilu? Ula Shnei Ha'Ifanim Ein HaKelim B'chinas Metzias Dover V'nei Atzmom V'Hareihem Chad Ima. In other words, it doesn't matter which way you learn it, that the Kelim, they are not a separate Indian from the oil. They're just one thing with the oil. They cause like what you might call a change of direction in the oil, but they're not a separate entity when the oil enters. They're just like a koyak within the oil to alter what you might call the general direction of the oil. So comes out Lafizeh or Behemoth, Ladasa Mareches, Ein B'chinas Kelim Klal. They're not really Kelim. They're just a koyak to bring certain nuances in the Gilui. Ki ima es spheres ein b'chinas atzmus levad. They're mamish. Now, when he means atzmus here, he means the oil ha'atzmus. I promise you. We'll have to go into this another time, but that's what it is. He doesn't mean atzmus in the sense of atzmus. He means atzmus meaning the very oil. V'ayichud hu bi'atzmus ha'ma'atzil. And that what we said is a yichud for an oil is for kelim. It's really mitzad. In other words, the way it is in the Etzem HaMatzil and the way it is in Atzilus is all the same thing for Ma'aseh. The way the Ur and the Keli are all one thing in the very essence of Hashem, that's the way it is in Atzilus. Like I said before, it's like a photograph, like something just moved that in such a way that it becomes. Al Dera, we've spoken some about the way the Atik becomes Nimtzo, Bein HaNe'atzol, or rather, Atik becomes Nimtza Bein HaNe'atzolim HaAtzil. That the whole Indian of the Kelim is a wondrous Indian. It's just a nuance inside the very essence of the Ma'atzil himself, and really the yichud between them is the same yichud that it has within him. It just comes in a way into Gilui, and Mamela, the Gilui is really just an expression of that yichud, K'moshe Hu Bi'etem. Meaning that Gilui in these Madregas is a very, very delicate Indian, and it's not by any means a separate Indian, and it's not by any means an Islapshus in a Dova Sheni. Whatever you'll say it, it's not like two Dvarim HaMishachtim. There must be some difference, and must be a richuk. It is a horror of the Etzem himself. How he's beyond the spheres mamish. Okay. It's not mamish the pnimius of the earth and the Ma'atzil. It's only a chitonius eisgalus memeno, but the whole Indian is really K'moshe Hu Etzloi, and it just comes down for some purpose. Here, Lagabi the Nevroi. In Kedusha, the oil and the Kli, they are B'Shorosham is mamish one Indian. You can't be. That's the way it goes all the way down the line. But this is a stress of how great the Yisachtus is between the oil and the Kli in Tachlis HaKedusha.